The cameras were rolling, the lights glaring, and the hum of anticipation filled the studio. It was supposed to be another polished, respectful interview with the young senator from Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy. Everyone expected the use of policing, Cold War anxieties, and his vision for America. But no one, not even the poised, seasoned reporter across from him, was ready for what would unfold in those few life-changing minutes. Madeleine Carter had spent the last decade carving out a name in journalism. Known for her sharp mind, composed demeanor, and unswerving professionalism, she had interviewed presidents, dictators, and movie stars. But today was different. Not because her guest was a rising political star, but because of who he reminded her of. Her father. It had been nearly 20 years since she last saw him, an army medic who left for Europe in 1944 and never came back. His letters stopped after the Battle of the Bulge, and his body was never recovered. She was 10. All her life, she'd buried that pain under layers of accomplishment, logic, and controlled ambition. But now, staring into the eyes of John Kennedy, himself a World War II veteran who had narrowly escaped death, something stirred. The resemblance was haunting, not physical, but spiritual. The same fire. The same quiet depth behind the smile. The interview began smoothly. Kennedy spoke with ease, answering her questions about foreign policy, civil rights, and the upcoming election. Madeleine followed her script. But then, during a short pause, something shifted. Kennedy looked at her not as a politician looking at a journalist, but as a man peering into someone's soul. He leaned slightly forward, his tone softening. "Ms. Carter," he said, and his voice carried a different weight now. "May I ask you something personal?" The room stilled. The crew glanced at one another, uncertain. Madeleine blinked, caught off guard. "Of course, Senator," she replied cautiously. He nodded slowly. "Your father, he served in the war, didn't he?" Her lips parted slightly. No one had ever brought that up on air. Not once in all her years. "Yes," she said quietly. "He was a medic in the 101st. Lost in Belgium." For a moment, there was silence. Not the awkward kind, but a reverent, almost sacred stillness. Kennedy's eyes softened with something between empathy and grief. "My father was in that theater too," he said. "And I've known many medics. Men who carried others through hell, and never asked for thanks. I've always believed, those men saved not just lives, but the soul of our country." A tremble worked its way through Madeleine's hands, but she kept them clenched in her lap, her knuckles white. She tried to say anything, but the words caught in her throat. Kennedy wasn't done. "I'm asking because I can see him. In you, the courage, the discipline, the restraint. I imagine he was a lot like that." The studio was silent. Not a single cameraman moved. No one dared clear their throat. Madeleine's eyes brimmed with tears that defied her training, her years of mastering composure. She looked down, then back at him, her voice breaking for the first time on live television. "I used to wonder if he died scared, or if he thought of me." Kennedy nodded solemnly. "I can't speak for your father. But I can tell you this from the men I served with, and from those I watched give their lives, they always thought of home, of family. And they died hoping they left something behind worth protecting." The emotion cracked her fully open. Her voice, barely a whisper, asked, "Do you believe they're still with us?" He smiled gently. "I do. I believe every time we live a life they'd be proud of. They're right here, in our choices. In our strength." Madeleine closed her eyes for just a second, as though touching a memory she had kept locked away for too long. When she opened them again, something inside her had shifted. Not broken, transformed. The producer signaled the end of the segment, but no one moved. Not yet. Kennedy reached across and placed a steady hand over hers, just for a second. It wasn't performative, it wasn't politics. It was human, real. After the cameras stopped, the crew remained unusually quiet. Several had tears in their eyes. It was a rare moment when television dropped its glossy facade and showed something raw, something sacred. That night, the clip went viral. Not for scandal or spectacle, but because it showed what America so desperately needed: humanity, vulnerability, connection. Letters poured into the network from viewers sharing their own stories of loss and remembrance. Veterans, widows, children. One letter stood out. It was from a retired soldier in Illinois who had served with Madeline's father. He wrote about how her father had carried him through gunfire when he was wounded, how he talked about his daughter every day, how he said, if he didn't make it back, he hoped she would grow up brave. Madeline read that letter on the air the following week, her voice steady, her eyes clear. He got his wish, she said simply. The story became a turning point, just in her career, but in her life. She no longer hid behind professionalism. She embraced the strength of her past, the pain that made her, and the memory of a man she no longer had to wonder about. And John Kennedy. He continued on his path toward the presidency. But those who were there that day say it was one of the finest moments of his life, not because of politics, but because of the quiet, noble power of empathy. Message of the story. Sometimes, the most powerful conversations aren't the ones filled with answers, but the ones where someone dares to ask the question no one else will and stays to listen to the silence that follows.